Good morning, everyone. Welcome to part 3 of the volunteer management training for nonprofit leaders. So we pick it up from where we stopped last week, and I hope that you have been enjoying the series. I think that you are, because your questions are showing that you are listening well. So we just pick it up from here today, where we talk about program evaluation. So in the first class, we talked about planning your volunteer management program. In the second class, we talked about recruiting your volunteers for that program that you have identified that you want to do. And in this third part, we will talk about program evaluation, right? Getting into the program, checking the things are in place. By this time, you have already implemented all of the things that we talked about. And for some of you here, what I hope that you have done, or what I hope that you should be doing now, is to use this series of trainings to actually plan a real program. I mean, if I was one, that's what I'll do. So even if you're not executing now, but you use everything that we're talking about to actually plan a volunteer program and use all of the tips and all of the knowledge to put your organization together, put your recruitment plan for volunteers together, and this is part 3 and part 4, so that at the end of the entire series, you can actually run a program that is powered by knowledge, right? So I will go right ahead to share. This session is very interesting, and I hope that you're going to have questions for me afterwards. So we're going to do a lot of talking. We're going to even do some, we're going to also do some, what's it called? Interaction. I'm going to be asking questions and be asking people to unmute their mics and talk, or people from that are joining from the American Spaces to also reach out and talk. So stay tuned for that. Moving on, immediately we'll go to the next thing. Okay, I'm trying to push to the next slide. And we're going to look at the purpose and learning objectives of this session. Now, today we're going to learn the importance of evaluating your volunteers and the program, and to examine different types of evaluation mechanisms. The session of today will also identify which aspects of a program to evaluate, right? Yes, so this is really after you have hosted that program. And so after you've done that, you need to look at your volunteers. You need to check the work that they have done, right? You need to also examine what has worked in the program, right? Because when you do this, you'll be able to get valuable feedback. Like I shared in the beginning of the class, you get valuable feedback that you can work with to inform your next volunteer program, to pick lessons that can be used for your other programs moving forward, because you're going to be getting valuable knowledge, right, from the evaluation. Okay, so at the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe various types of evaluations, right? There are different types of strategies for evaluating, so we're going to talk about those types. You will also develop evaluation mechanisms. Also, I forgot to share that this session is going to end next week. So we're going to conclude this first part. This one is divided in 2 parts. We conclude this first part today and conclude the other ones next week. So at the end of the entire program, this is what you're supposed to learn. You're supposed to be able to develop evaluation mechanisms and list the reasons for evaluating volunteers. What do you want to find out? Why do you want to evaluate them? What do you want to learn? You have to think about what you want to learn in advance so that you can identify that lesson when you see it, right? You need to explain what aspects of programs to evaluate, what portions of your volunteer program, because by this time, you already finished the program. From our example, you've already finished hosting the entrepreneurial, the employment events that you run in that community. Or you've already evaluated, you have already built the cassava processing factory, taking it from my NYC experience that I shared. So I've already by this time finished creating the cassava factory. I've engaged the widows. The factory is working. We've commissioned it, and we had all the NYSC people come by and look at it. What do I want to check at the end of this event? So I'm going to be sharing about that in detail with you using that example from the cassava processing factory, which was a volunteer project that I ran as a youth copper. I know some of you listening are also coppers and you're also young. Some of you are even currently doing your planning or thinking about a NYSC community development service. This will be very helpful for you. So moving on, we go right in, we dive right in. So these are some of the basics of program evaluation. So you have to think about three key things: process, results, and impacts. Process, results, and impacts. On the process aspect, you have to examine the tasks volunteers perform. Remember, before this time, you have outlined their program expectation. There was a name we called it last week, I think is job description or engagement expectations, which is writing out what you want the volunteers to do. And as we advance in the course today, I will ask some of you to tell me if you have already thought about that and what did you think about. Some of you shared your programs and plans that you want to do with me last week. So I will also ask you to tell me as it relates to your project or to your program, what you would want to examine, right? I forgot to do something last week. I should have actually given an assignment because I would want for some of you to come up today and actually tell me, because it's important to be putting into action what you are learning. I mean, I'm a teacher and I like for my students to tell me how they have put in action what they've learned. I am also a coach. I coach a group of women entrepreneurs, 41 of them, for a UK program. Okay, why I mentioned that is because I find out that in the course of our coaching session, there are so many people that can work together, right? There are so many things they can quickly actually do from what we have learned on that day. And I give them the assignment to get back to me in a week or in 2 weeks, how they have actualized that. I've seen that it works because without doing that, they don't really do anything afterwards. I hope that you can be different, right? I hope that you can. So I'm going to give assignments before leaving today for next week. Sorry, for this week, Thursday. Some of you are going to be telling me, I'm going to call up by name. I mean, that's mostly for those in the chat box, but I'm going to call out by name for the American spaces that have joined. I'll call the coordinators of those places to select somebody in those places to tell us on Thursday, how they have practicalized what we're learning. So even if you haven't run an actual program, because of course you don't have time, but how have you used what you've learned here to design a good volunteer engagement, right? I will be asking that on Thursday, and at least all the American Corners that joined will share something, and at least one person or two persons from the live class, from the online section, right? So it's important to check the tasks that your volunteers have performed, the skills and abilities that they bring to the job, the skills and abilities they bring. Remember, you have already identified the skills that they have. That's why you hired them to join your volunteer group. So for me, for instance, during my NYSC project, I also looked at, I tried to look at my colleagues that are in my fellow NYSC corpus and looked for people who had agricultural skills. Even though I didn't find, but those were the kinds of people that I looked out for, because I thought that they would bring their cassava processing skills to help train the women or to help monitor the process of a cassava processing, how the whole process goes. Or somebody, because we had that cassava factory featured by the news. And so I could have had that volunteer who is skilled in mechanical engineering, how to run all of the machines, make sure they're working, check the diesel engine, make sure that it's working. And yes, those were the kinds of skills I could have looked out for. I could have also looked out for someone who is good with community organization, right? And because they could put the videos together for me whilst I try and do all the aspects of the program. Good. So this is how you're to think of your community-based project that is volunteer-powered, right? You have to think about how your volunteers are satisfied with the program. Did they meet their goals? Did they meet their goals? Did they feel happy at being involved? Did they think that they could use this experience to advance their career? Did they think that they could include this into their CVs? How do they feel about it? Now, one thing that I do with my own volunteers is that after any session, we do a lot of online programs. We have a fellowship currently ongoing, Climate Leadership Fellowship, and it's virtual. And so after every virtual class where we invite experts to train our fellows, at the end of each 1 hour session, I tell all my staff and volunteers to wait back in the call. Actually, they usually don't leave because we've started this practice for like 2 years now. So naturally, they just wait on the call and all of the participants will leave the group. What we usually do afterwards is, and honestly, I can't remember how I learned this thing, but I'm just happy that I can see, it's included here to talk about. It's something that I used to do, and I think you can pick it up as well. They all stay back, and I just ask them randomly and very informally what they thought about the program. They'll talk. I give everyone an opportunity to talk. There's nothing like I don't have anything to say. Everyone speaks. Everyone speaks. And also, there is nothing like, oh, I agree with Emmanuel. No. What exactly does that mean? What do you mean by I agree? You agree with what? So I encourage my volunteers to speak their mind. Sometimes if they cannot find words, I give them clues. It's always important to ensure that your volunteers speak with their own words. And just make sure you eliminate all of those places where they say, I agree. I just agree. It's really good. It's a good program. I agree. It's a good program. What is good about it? You need to make them bring out those words. That's what you're going to write down as your feedback. That's really the impact. That's what you're going to learn, right? And that really reminds me of something. that reminds me of something very important. Like Mr. Samuel said, I used to be a member of the American Center Lagos for a long time. For almost 4 years, or 3 or 4 years, I was really regular there. I was always doing online courses or doing some things related to my work, but getting feedback from some of the online programs and the resources, using the resources that they provide there to just do my own research and my work, right? So there was a time, and this thing I want to share, Mr. Samuel Itayo was involved in it. I think it will be a good example to what I'm trying to say when I'm saying to give feedback, right? Make sure you bring out the very impacts that your program made on the volunteers. Make sure you don't let them say it was good. Let them give you details. So in that American Center, usually when you come into the American Center in VI Lagos, you will fill a form, right? So you pick up a form and go and sit down on the computer or on the library section. So you fill the form. Usually Mr. Kester, who works with Mr. Samuel, will go around to ensure that people have filled in their forms. In that form, you have to mention exactly why you are there that day. Maybe you want to finish taking a course, or you want to do your research for your master's degree, or you came there to borrow a book. You have to write it down. But at the end of your time there, and when you're leaving, you have to write a feedback. There's a feedback session at the end. So I know I usually write, it was good. I usually write something like, they'll say, what did you think about our services today? And I just say it was good, nice. I usually just say like nice or something. And I remember one day, Mr. Samuel was looking into somebody's form. It wasn't me he was talking to, but he talked to that person. And I know I remember clearly what he said. I know I talked about it too. He said, nice, what is... You guys, you don't understand. You are not giving this is not a feedback. It was nice. What do you mean by it was nice? Tell us what was nice about it. Don't just say it was good. Tell us what was good about it. And I overheard that. And from the next week, I then began to really think about it. So I began to say things like, the internet was fast. Because they'll say, what did you like about the session? So I say things like, usually I'll say it was nice. But then I say things like, after that feedback, the internet was super fast. Then I try to really think of what I liked in that environment. is interesting, guys. It's actually an intentional thing. So I begin to think, what did I like? Because it's also like a volunteer thing, because they provided that place for free. It's their own way of volunteering for the Nigerian people, right? And provide these resources for free to youth, right? So they want to get that feedback. So I usually say things like, the internet was super fast, and then there was a time the internet went off for a while. I also commented that the internet went off for a while and it disturbed my course, right? My life course. So exactly, and usually they fix the internet really fast, but then it did disturb it. And I thought that it's important to also give feedbacks that are like that, and not only the good ones. Because if you don't do that, the people will never get thinking from you. They will never know how what has happened has affected you. They may think that, okay, she doesn't mind. You need to give that feedback no matter how good or bad it is. So that's a good example that I remembered from the American Center Lagos. Then I was trying to say that in my own programs, we do that a lot, where I now asked my volunteers, I said, what do you guys think about this event? There was a speaker that we had who is very popular. He's a very popular speaker, like not just popular, like, that speaker has a very wide reach. A lot of people talk about him. So we invited him to train our students on one of the topics that we believed was his area of expertise, because it had to do with young people and all of that. But this speaker is my colleague. I know the person very well, but the thing that he said, I was like, it was not like what we expected. It came as a shock. I've known the person for a while, and I know that the person is really widely recognized globally and all of that. But the delivery was, honestly, I'm going to say it was not what we expected. It was poor. So I wanted to know I wanted to be sure that I was not the one thinking that. So I asked my volunteers what they thought about the events, right? So immediately, the first one just immediately hit the nail on the head. He said, no, that the speaker we got was not accurate, that he was not sound, was the word that volunteer said. He was not sound. My volunteer even said that she could do a better job. I know she was just exaggerating, but she said that we can think about how to not invite that person again, but to think about how to correct it later, maybe give guidelines or give pointers to how they can design their presentation. Now, that feedback helped us do a better job the next time we had the program. So do you see how collecting specific feedbacks can help? And so usually after asking my volunteers what they thought, I then ask them what to be done. Of course, I already know what to be done, but I ask them. It forces them to think and actually bring in suggestions that are from their perspective, because there are a lot of things that informs a person's perspective. It could be because they're female. It could be because they've been to prison before. I'm not saying they were to prison, but I'm saying that some people will think some things because of where they've been in life. It could be because they live in a certain area of Lagos, and so their perspective will just capture the realities of that place. It could be because they have a youth NGO, and then their feedback or perspective will just capture that kind of area that you haven't thought about because you're not in that area. That is why collecting feedback from multiple people is always perfect. So moving on, you have to ask them the amount of the satisfaction with the program. That's what I just described. You have to check the amount of time they contribute and their retention rate. How serious are they in the program? Did some of them come for the event and then leave quickly and say, I have to just quickly do something? Are they really committed? Did they contribute time and stayed true to it? Or did they do it haphazardly? You have to check that. There are volunteers who do, especially if you're not paying money. You see that you get volunteers who just do it, just for doing sake. Maybe let me just be able to put in my CV and say that I did this, and they're not really committed. You need to check for those ones so that you can talk to them about it or change them. That covers the process aspect. And then the result aspect, you have to check the result of the event. You have to base your evaluation on the result. You have to base your evaluation of results on your organization's goals and objectives. You have to look at the entirety of the program that you have organized and think about how it is in alignment with your goals and objectives. Of course, you have also thought about that before, but you would then look at the program results, right? What impact that you have made out of this cassava processing factory that we built. How many of the 200 videos are really able to be engaged? Or do we need to provide more equipment for them to be engaged? Do we need to build another smaller room by the corner for more of the women to be doing the packaging? Maybe they will be putting the gari inside the bag. What can we do extra? Or is this perfect? Does it relate to our goals and objectives, right? So when you check this, it also means that you'll be able to think about how to do that thing better next time, right? So you make sure that it's in alignment with your goals and objectives, even though you thought of it before, but it's a delivery in alignment, it's the result in alignment. There are two things at play here. The fact that you implemented and what happened after the implementation. What happened after the implementation? You have to take note of that, right? So we did the cassava processing factory, and on the commissioning day, we commissioned a very, very prominent person who was formerly a presidential aspirant, came to my program that day to commission the project. So those are all part of the results and the delivery, right? So when you think of it that way, you're able to note if what you've done, if you were able to execute your project in the way that you have planned to. Was there any mishaps? Did the community people come to cause trouble and say that you were disturbing them on that day? Did they come and put markings on your building to say this building is not supposed to be here? They did that in my own time when we built the cassava factory. So they came and put that mark. There's this mark they put on the house, the red mark, to say this building is not here. One morning, I just woke up and went to my site to continue building the factory, and I saw that mark there, and they wrote that thing there that they said it shouldn't be here. And I saw two people there. At first I was angry and really upset. Hello, what's going on here? And so they now say, yes, that the building is this, that, the building is not supposed to this, that. I was very firm. So I said, first of all, I don't think you should be. First of all, the land has been approved and given to me by the Oba of the village, the king of the village. The land is also approved as an area of market. It's a market land space they gave me. So it's not as if they gave me a space that was somebody's house. It was an area that has been mapped out to build a market. They had a market at another different location, but that land they gave me was also a place to do the market. In fact, I later saw, because of our factory there, I later saw people, they started selling cassava there. Sorry about that. I think my internet's breaking a little bit. Hello.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry about the delay. So I met that challenge because when you're talking about results, you have to check how things unfolded in your project, right? So as we're building, my goal was to build a cassava factory. So as we're building, I had 3 structures in that land space that we built. A milling room that had equipment and all of the machines. It had like 3 different machines, yes. And then we had another room for processing, like for turning it into 4 structures, for turning it for the other one was a place to dry the cassava that has been grated and dry the drying section. Then the process will move from there to the room where they fry the gari. We created a lot of the frying spaces, like 7 frying spaces. That one was the biggest structure, and it was really, it had spaces where the smoke can go out. That was the 3rd one. And then the 4th one was, the 4th place was the packaging room, right? So these are just small, nice structure, just suitable for what it's called for. So the second building we're building, they came and put marks on it. They put marks on all the, at that point, I was only building the very first structure, yes. So whilst you're executing your project, because the result has to do with your project execution. Like I said, I think I also said that last week, be conscious, take note of the mishaps that come on the way, yeah? Take note of the mishaps that come. the problems that come, the people that say stop work, so that you can use that to be informed about your activities next time. So that you can use that to be informed about how to do that stuff differently next time. So I was very firm and I told them this is a market land area and I did not give myself this land. The Oba gave us land. I also told them that the project is a volunteer project. By the way, I'm building this thing for free, okay, for the widows. And I say, well, the place you put it, the place you put it. Anyway, what I did, I just went straight and reported it to the king. He was very livid. I'm very, very angry with them. I think he just told me, don't worry, next time you will not see them there again. I think he sent some boys, and they used to fear that king very much at the time. Even though that's not necessary information for you, but they quickly obeyed him and, that problem disappeared. So that was one of the things we noted. Yes, and you need to take note of that. So the results, you have to ensure that the outcome is what you had planned, right? And then you have to think about the consequences of your volunteer program, that the consequences of your volunteer program is in alignment with your organization goals and objectives. Let me give another example. If, for instance, part of your goals and objective for the program is that to foster peace and community in that place, to promote peace and community, part of your goals for the project, right? Because let me say how that relates to my own program, to that program, the Cassava Factory program. There are people in this community that are Muslims and Christians. And the target for our program was Muslims and Christian widows, right? And there's usually that space. My part of our goals was really to promote peace and just togetherness, right? United by a common goal, which was food. So you see, my project was going to be a place like a unifier, like there's an English word for it, a bringing together kind of, so that they can overlook their cultural differences or religious differences. Because there's always this thing about Christian and Muslim people being in the same place, and I don't know if things happen from there, but the goal is to bring them together for a common purpose, food. And so that at that point in time, there is no concern about, oh, the Muslim people, the Christian people are not supposed to have meat, in the mosque. Because we did that. These mosque people, because we did that where we had all the women come to a church, because it was a church that gave us the space to use, right? And they are both Muslim and Christians. Sometimes we have all the people gather together at the mosque. These women were working together. I've never seen a unity like that before. We selected people from each groups, right, to have leadership roles in the association that we created for the factory. We had like 6 leadership roles, and it was really equal, each one representing each another's interest. But could that have happened without that common unifier, right? Where these two groups could come together and for a common goal could work together for one common goal, which is food. So I mentioned that because I said that was also one of our goals. Remember, I thought about that in advance. One of our goals to promote peace and unity. And so now that we've established the factory, did I meet that goal? That's where I'm trying to get to, results. So now it's important that I evaluate my result to check that it's still within my organization's goals and objectives. So now the consequence of my volunteer program, is it in alignment with my organizational goals and objectives? And in this case, I would say yes. Now, before I round up that very point, I like to point out that that was the purpose, that was part of the goals of the program. So that when the community people tried to disturb me and said, don't build on our land, I had to think of our goal, which was to promote peace and unity. So now if you come across any mishap, make sure that you deal with it in such a way that you do not go back on your word or on your goal, on the goal of the organization. Yeah. So you have to think of it in this way. Where so I thought about it in that way, when I saw that problem, I thought to myself, these people want to look for trouble. What should I do best? I remember that I did not want a place where a problem started because of me. So I went and took the matter to the king. And the king said it will not exist again. And that was true. The next year, I didn't see the problem there. But had it been that problem persisted, and they now wanted to start doing a riot, No, you cannot build there. You cannot be from Igbo land and you want to come and be building in our place, because there were some of those issues as well. Because remember, we're talking about promoting peace and unity. So if that happened, I would think about how that aligns with my goal and if I wanted to continue the project or not, because then it looks like my project is working against my goals. Because instead of promoting peace and unity, it is bringing chaos and disarray. I hope that that point is clear. This is an example. Because those people left us alone, they did not cause problem. But if they did cause a problem, I will look at my project and think about something different to do, or how to tackle it, or how to settle the matter with a peaceful, during a respectful and peaceful dialogue, so that we can sort that matter. That's a way of thinking about if your volunteer program consequences or results aligns with your project goals. You have to always make sure of that, because the internet never forgets. Tomorrow, somebody will dig it up that you are saying you are doing a program and that you wanted to promote peace. Instead, you went to a community and caused a riot. You guys are fake. They will post it on social media, and someone who does not like your project will fund it so that it can go around. They will pay money to bloggers and to different people to move the news. So that when that happens, you cannot really defend it, because your project caused a riot in the community. Maybe some people might die. And in that case, nobody will look at the good your project did. Nobody's going to look at the fact that your project provided employment for widows. They will just look at the bad part, that your project caused riots and killed people. And so you're going to really appear funny, and funders are not going to want to work with you, because they will feel like you're not good with the people of the community. That even if they give you money, you go to the community and cause problems. That's usually how bad news used to be, even if you're like that or not. This is why it's important to make sure that your results are in alignment with your overall goals and objectives. I hope that that is very clear. So moving on, I will then talk about the next point. The next point, let me check the chat. I think some people are writing some things in the chat. Let me see. I can't hear you. Matthew Solomon, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
We cannot hear you.
Thank you, sir. So, okay, yeah. And going on to the next point, we talk about impact. Impact is the reason why you're doing what you're doing. If you're not going to have an impact, you might as well sit back at home. You might as well not waste your time, right? You have to examine the degree to which the overall program that you did has addressed the problem that you planned for it to address, right? You have to check the impact. The impact is similar to results, but impact is really, what has it achieved? Did it achieve the unemployed problem you're trying to solve? Did the factory achieve the unemployment problem and the lack of food that we had in the community? And then when that happened, what was the outcome of that? I want you guys not to be confused, because it's confusing. Results and impact are confusing. Right, so in results, we talked about the fact that you then delivered that project. So I set out to build a cassava processing factory. The result is that I then established the factory. People could see it physically. That's the result. They could physically see the factory. They could physically see that factory. Then, but then the impact is more. The result is that women then started working in the factory. They then started to process the cassava. They then started to really do the things that you set out that they would do. Remember, that's the result. That is the project meeting your goals and objectives, because that thing was now established and it was working the way that you planned. The impact is that what was the importance of those things that you now established, like the results that you have achieved? Why was it important? Like, what did it do? That's the point of confusion, where, because you can think what it did now, the women now started working there. That's what it did. The women, I set up the factory and the women were working there. If people went to the factory, they'll see them peeling cassava. They'll see some of them grating the cassava. They'll see other people bagging the cassava. And that's the thing I did now. What else is impact? What else is impact? Impact is what occurred as a result of that thing that the women were doing. I'll tell you now. I'll give you two examples to tell you. I'll give examples to tell you. So talking about the cassava factory, unemployment was reduced So this is 200 widows taken out from the streets, and you have to be very meticulous about it and add statistics. So you have to think about all of the women who are widows, and you can say something like, oh, unemployment has been reduced on the side of the widows by 42%. That is an example of impact. Because any fund or anyone that hears it can quickly imagine what has happened. So all of the other things we were doing were just really talk. They were all mostly talk. Impact is, why should we support you to do this again? Because if we support you to do this again, you can take people out of poverty. And we're not talking it by mouth. We mean through action and proven impacts. That's the meaning of impact. What will your project achieve? Not just the result. Yes, you will do the training of the unemployment training. So you will do the training and all the people will come for the training and then they'll go home. Then what happens after that? That is why people fund NGOs to do projects, because of that impact, right? So make sure some of your impacts are tangible and are things that can be measured. It is always helpful like that. For it to be things that can be measured, you need to be able to summarize or talk about your project in a way that it's easy for anyone who's reading your report to see what was achieved. Usually some funders just look at that ending. They don't even look at all the processes you did, all the things you did, you now build the factory. They are interested in what has happened afterwards. Right, so in my case, in the cassava processing factory, 200 widows representing for 2% of blah, 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 just, have now been removed out of poverty. But not just that, the impact is that up to 500 children who were orphans can now have daily bread because their mothers have been employed. You see what I mean by impact now? That's the impact of my project. That's the impact, because 500 orphans are able to go to school because their mothers are earning small money. 500 orphans have moved from poverty, they can find food to eat, and they are able to go to school. Do you see how my impact now relates to education? My impact now relates to education. I've been able to tie what I did for some poor beggars to education. So I said I've reduced the number of out-of-school children from 2,000 to 1,500. I've reduced it, and that represents about 25%. I've taken 25% off from the streets into schools. That's impact number two. Number one is I've reduced unemployment by 42%. Then I have reduced the number of out-of-school children to 25%. I've taken 20 to 75%. Yeah. So from 100% to 75%, 2,000 kids to 1,500 kids. I've sent 500 to school, and I didn't even do it directly. So that's the interesting thing in it, is that I did a project for their parents. Their parents are able to give back a little bit of half payments for their fees, so that the school is able to accept them back. That's an example of the impact. You need to think about your project in this way. So your impact is not your result. Your impact is what has happened as a result of your result. As a result of your result, yeah? What's the growth that occurred in that industry or in that community as a result of impact that you did? Right, so that's the impact number two. Let me tell you, impact number three from that one project is that microfinance, establishment of a microfinance scheme. So now the women are out of bank. Let me tell you, they are villagers who do not have bank accounts. They're out of that, I think they call it unbanked. But now our project has provided is kind of like a microfinance banking scheme where the women can borrow and lend to one another from the proceeds of the factory. So that women who do not know anything about banking are getting educated about money and financial literacy, and are learning how to save, and are learning how to borrow and then pay back at a certain time, things that they did not know before. So financial literacy and banking the unbanked is a third impact. Remember, we're talking about the result here is that we built a factory. This other thing I'm talking about is the impact, right? And so that is, and so whilst I'm talking about my impact, I'm thinking about how this is relating to global schemes. I'm thinking about global subject matters. Let me tell you, I'm sure most of you already know some of the most important global subject matter. Women is one of them. Climate change is one. Tech is another. What other subject matter? Financial technology, fintech, yeah. And maybe if some of you remember some, you can share in the chat box, but these are like some of the things that are being talked about in the world now, right? So any innovation at all that you can share, any impact at all you can share, and agriculture as well, food security, yeah, as well, tech, software development, and anything in ICT. It's because these are the new ways of doing things. So there's a lot of traction around that, women empowerment, girls, and things like that. So I try to intelligently relate my impact to those subject matters, right? So I'm not saying that if my impact did not have to do with subject matter, I will now invent one. No, it has to be alongside education as well. Is another thing that is, especially education technology, edutech, yeah. So these are like the things that are access to education. These are like infrastructure as well. These are like the topics. So I try to relate it to at least 5 areas of importance globally, where funders are looking to put money into in different countries, right? The priorities of my government, yeah? But mostly international bodies and agencies where they're looking to put money. So that if I find an opportunity, I can apply for it because I can say that I have these impacts. And it's going to make sense because you're not talking about what you did. You are talking about the results you have and the impact of the results you have. The life-changing things that came out from your project. Employment, and somebody is earning money. Somebody is able to send their children to school. Somebody who has never visited a bank before is saving money. These are really, really good impacts, right? So that's how you can think about your project, defining the impacts. Let me think of another impact that came from my project, that promoting peace and unity I talked about. Guys, religion is a difficult subject in our world, not just Nigeria. And I'm sure you know that. I'm sure you know that religion is a hot topic and that there's a very, very controversial subject matter. It's a very, very controversial subject matter where some people have a certain notion about one religion, or they have another notion about another religion. But how is it that your project was able to bring 2 groups together that usually are not always together? That is an example of an impact. This is not a result, it is an impact of the results, right? So you have all these women working together, laughing together every Christmas and every Easter. They come together, they do it today and share proceedings from the factory. What they do with money is that they buy lots of gari, not gari, sorry, because they make gari, but they buy rice, they buy, you know how people do at the end of the year, they buy all of those things. And they usually call me on the phone to say thank you and to say that we are here, look at us. They do a video and say, and then they will have their pastor call me who has a video call that can make a video call, you know, and they say we bought crayfish, we bought all these things, we used the money from the factory, and now we are going to share it. And they will say thank you. They will do a party. They do this almost 5 times a year. Christmas, the 2 Muslim celebrations, Easter, and yeah, the four religious celebration, because they are mostly religious people, right? So they do that. And can you imagine women coming together, women that are Christians and Muslims coming together for the Christmas party or for the Easter party, or Christians and Muslims coming together for the Ilea party or for the Salah party? Do you understand? And they stay in one room and eat together. That's, I don't know how often that happens, right? But it was a big milestone. And I remember that year I applied for the Mandela Washington Fellowship, and I said this in my interview. I think that was one of the factors that said, wow. I mean, because this is a strong topic in Nigeria. How were you able to keep these people in one place? And they did not argue, or they did not say, oh, you didn't cover your head. You know that we're Muslims. Why didn't you cover your head and come in here? No, they were all existing in peaceful harmony. And that really led towards the culture of the community where they then just live together. Even if they're not talking about the factory or something, they now exist well. They have a leadership team that are made up of Christians and Muslims, and they do their meetings together, they deliberate and all of that. So that was one of the most important impacts. And at the time, I was really young. I didn't know it was an impact. It was actually, I think, was it my father who helped me point that out? He was one who brought out this point for me. And I wrote it in my application. One thing, because they said, One of my questions as a Mandela Fellowship, I knew that some of you applied, was how did you meet a difficulty and how did you surmount it? So I talked about not really wondering how the but united by together, they lived together. They ate together every month to think about what to do with their money because they were making money from the factory, right? So, because to the extent that they were lending money from what they had at the end of the month, they were then making money. You know, they had to talk about what they want to do. Do you know that at one time, one of their machines spoiled? This was in 2013. One of their equipment in the factory got spoiled, and they told me about it. But they then told me that they had money to fix it. I was shocked because it was going to take a lot of money. You know, and then they told me that they have a local welder in their community who could do it. You know, so this was just like a good example of that community living together, existing without the thought of tribe or religion. That is an impact. That's number 4 impacts. I can't remember any other. I think that I had up to 5. So, but as soon as I remember it, I will share that with you. So, this is how you ought to think about your projects. And I hope I've been able to make a good difference between results and impact, because they're very similar and confusing, because you can do the project and deliver the project. But what happened after then? What happened after then? You can also, if you were in the clean energy sector, I gave an example one other day where some people donated stoves to some women, but the women were not using the stoves, right? That's an example of a result and an impact. Now, the result here is that they raised funds and gave out, I think it was 100 clean cook stoves. 100 clean cook stoves, yeah. Yes, so they did the whole ceremony and the launching and the commissioning and the project commissioning. They cut the ribbon. They gave we saw all the women holding the stoves like this. They took pictures. 6 months down the line, there was no lifestyle change. Your impacts have to do with a lifestyle change that occurred as a result of your results. A lifestyle change. So in this case, the good impact could have been a change of behavior, right? Now, the women using those clean cook stoves, which will lead to a reduction in debt. Remember, the problem you have to always think about the problem you're initially trying to solve. See, everything must align with your result. You need to check that the problem you set out to solve in that beginning time when you identify the problem, that your result and impact actually tackled the very problem. If it did not, you tried though, but you have not really, you could have as well not do it, right? You have to be able to articulate what has happened as a result of what you've done. That's what you can boast about later. That's your accomplishment in that project. What did you accomplish? So what happened after the training? Okay, you train people. What's happened after the training, right? So even in my industry where I run a school called Renewable Energy Tech Training Institute, where we train people about solar design, installation, and building of solar panels as well. Somebody have actually asked me that thing before. Thank God I know my answer, because you have to always be ready with your elevator speech, right? What happened after the training? Because training is vague. It's vague, right? So, okay, train ahead and so what. But I myself and team will always think about how to quantify what we've done. I have the data. We keep tabs with our trainees. We push opportunities to them to get solar energy jobs or to install solar for people. We have a track record and a database of out of about 1,500 people we've trained, about 32% are in jobs and are running their solar companies. I even know the amount of solar power that they have installed in kVA, in kilowatt hours. So I can say this in when I'm trying to make a presentation, or when I'm trying to pitch to people, or when I'm trying to apply for a grant. In 2 years, I can say in 3 years, the company is 3 years now. In 3 years, our trained engineers have installed up to 250 kilowatts electricity, which has provided 300 and something kilowatt hours. That's not correct. That's not the correct kilowatt hours for 250 kilowatts. So I'm just giving that a quick example. I've installed 250 kilowatt hours of solar power, thereby helping to combat and to offset 17,000 tons of carbon dioxide, which would have gone to the atmosphere to cause climate change. In that one, you have set a problem, you have listed your strategy, you have also listed your results and the impact. You have to always do your pitch like this. That's what I just said now. The fact that I trained engineers who were without employment, the problem. The executive strategy was that I trained them, the process, right? The result is that they are now trained officials. And then part of the impact is that they then gained employment or started their own business. But beyond that, they then executed and actually installed solar power. That's still part of the result. But then the solar power they've installed, I calculated how much hours of electricity that is in the last 3 years. And then I also told you, I also calculated for you how much carbon dioxide that solar power electricity installed has stopped from going to the atmosphere. And I tell you that calculation. In fact, another thing I could do is to tell you what that means in perspective, like how many percent of smoke, how many cars that will take out from the road, cars that are causing climate change. At a glance, your funder or your listener will quickly know the meaning of what you're saying. Wow, they'll quickly understand what you have done and the impact quickly. And then they can decide if they want to fund you or not, because they can see your result, they can see your impact and see how it aligns to their goals. Make sure that you have this in your pitch immediately. You must always have that in your pitch, in your elevator pitch, when you're talking about your volunteer powered program. We did this, we found this problem, we did this, we designed this solution, and now 200 women are able to work and take their children to school, removing 200 women from the lack of employment and also taking 500 kids to school. Great, wow. Unemployment, lack of education, banking, financing, look at all the impacts you have from one activity. So that's how to think about your project impact. That's how to think about it in a way that it makes sense and that anyone who listens to it can connect to it. So I've just shared 2 examples. I have one more. I talked about impact. I talked about the 4 main impacts from the cassava factory. And I also talked about a training that when you're thinking about training, make sure that you know what the impact of your training is, because training is not tangible. In fact, especially with projects that are not tangible, unlike the cassava factory, which is tangible, you need to think deeply about how you will measure the results, because it's difficult to measure the results of intangible activities like trainings. I'm sure that at the end of this training that you're doing, that the US Embassy already have a way that they will measure the result of the training. You guys are going to fill a survey. So that's how they'll know the impact of the knowledge that you now have. For me, for my training that I'm delivering here, I'm going to measure it by asking you on Thursday. That's how I will know what I've spent my time teaching these people. Does it really make sense? Did they really understand it? That's how I will know. So trainings are like that because they're not tangible. So that's why maybe you see some of your friends that are getting funding, but you're not getting funding. If they're able to do their delivery well and their tangible impact is seen, they will get, because it is seen. You get, like, it is seen, but the intangible ones are not seen. They are measured. You need to have a strategy to measure them so that you can communicate what that impact has been. That's what I just told you about our own company. Look at the way that we measured it. Another thing that we're planning to do is to visit the locations of all of our entrepreneurs. Some of them are in Alaba, some of them are in different places, and do a video. And do a video of them talking about their process, what they train, and remember, you must always link it to your result. Remember, my result in this case is the training. I trained you. So I will use this evaluation metrics in mind when I'm doing the video, because I would want to align whatever they will say to me in the video to the problem that I was trying to solve and to the result. Measure the impact of our training. Now, there is a tangible physical business that resulted from our intangible training. And I will show this in the video, right? So, wow, just from a training and there's a physical business. And so I'll do that video. I'll show the person talking. I'll show them during the time of editing the video, we will put all the pictures of the person when he was in his training, which we have pictures for everybody, which he was in training, how, and then himself in his shop and his products. And then he will tell us how the training helped him. Right, so do this kind of a video for about top five performers, right? And attach their website, their company websites. You know, that will speak volumes. Because at a glance, people would be able to quickly see, okay, wow, training, but this is the result. They'll quickly align your work with the impact. Without this, it does not make sense. I'll tell you the truth, and I will not paint words to say, okay, you should just manage it. Still do it. You are doing something. It's still something you're doing. No, make sure that something you're doing has an impact. If not, you can as well try another thing that would have an impact, right? And then and then talking about the, okay, sorry, I lost my words. I was going to say something else. I lost it. I hope I remember it soon. So moving on, that is how you would think about your program. You have to think about your program like this. And I hope that some of you are already writing out and thinking about maybe former projects you've been in. You use this metric to measure it. What impact did you really have, or you forgot to mention it? You forgot to measure it. Because if you didn't measure it and if it was a training, you won't really be able to measure it well again. There's a young man that I reviewed his application for M. Mandela Washington Fellowship, the one that just closed. There's something he said in his application, in his write-up. A very good point. Okay, it was a recommendation letter. I think I wrote him a recommendation letter. So he sent me that thing to write in the recommendation letter, how he worked with a group, I think the United Nations group in Nigeria, to galvanize about 2,000 youths for a program. You know, for a good program. I can't remember the topic. I think it was a program on SDGs, yes. And in fact, there were about 3 things that were good in that speech that I could use in my recommendation to make his application really outstanding. Because, you know, it's not everything that should be included in a professional program like the MWF. You have to include things that are impactful. You don't just say anyhow things. So I thought that, first of all, the number was impactful. 2,000 was impactful. Then the brand, United Nations. These were things that could make his application outstanding. But something was missing. And I said, okay, wow, this is a good point. I told him this is a really good point. So you led the team that galvanized those 2,000 people for a SDG campaign. I said, no, he didn't even, and I said, okay, 2,000 people to do what? He was looking at me. 2,000 people that did what? He didn't know. I mean, he said it was for an SDG campaign. Okay, what did they do? Because that's very vague. An SDG campaign, it's vague. What did they do? He didn't answer that. What was the result of what they did? Because that's when your statement is complete and makes sense. Any other thing you say then doesn't really make sense, honestly. Because you have this fine thing that I could have used. You have United Nations involved, and you said you led a team that brought 2,000 people together. That makes sense, right? So what did the 2,000 people do? What exactly happened in SDG? He couldn't answer it. And because of that, I could not include that in his write-up because it doesn't make sense. Because that's my own reputation on ground. Like if I cannot say and defend what you said you did. So I gave him that feedback because he didn't know, he just thought it was okay to say 2,000 people for United Nations for an SDG campaign. That does not make sense, honestly. So he then realized it when I explained it to him. He realized it. He said that he did not know that it was like that. I said, okay, can you remember what happened? He said he does not know. And he also did not keep a record. And that was how I couldn't use that very strong point for him in his recommendation. That's an example. So that's why it's very important to put into record all that you're doing. Record and keep a record of all that you're doing. Not just keeping a record of the results, because in his case, he just said the result. And the result he said was even half complete. It wasn't complete. Because he didn't say what they did in the campaign exactly. Was it the training? Or did you guys do a community drive? Did you go to 100 streets in Lagos and pasted posters talking about SDGs? Then what happened from there? Did how many communities get trained? Did how many communities change their behavior? Did how many communities build sandbags to stop flooding? Did how many communities do what as a result of your training? That is your impact. So he said that, wow, I mean, that was like a new one for him. You have to always think about each of your projects like that and think about the delivery and the impact that it has. So that was the third example. I have a fourth example to share about how to communicate your impact. There's an example I shared with you guys the day that we started about a couple that went to a village and saw that pregnant women were always dying. Let's think about the impact of that project for a while. So after our young couple saw that pregnant women were dying, during childbirth, he then identified the solution. He designed a solution of what he was going to do. He said that he was going to run a program. I'm sure you remember it. And he tried to recruit his fellow corps members that are doctors, corps members that are good, that are nurses, his corps members that are good in training to come and train the women. At the end of the day, they trained the women, right? They trained the local birth center operator, the owner, and his midwives, 5 midwives, right? So that's what I mean when I say they trained the women. So they trained them on the best practices to look out for or to root for when you are doing your, sorry, excuse me, I lost my words. When you're trying to implement a delivery, when you're trying to take in a baby, there's a word they call it, I can't figure it out now, right? So they trained them on the modern practices. They donated betting kits and taught them how to use the betting kits because their goal was to reduce that. Do you remember that was their goal? Remember, your results and your solution must always try to answer to the problem you've identified and the goal that you set out to do, which is the solution, right? So they identified 3 things they wanted to do: to train the women, to donate betting kits, to train the women on modern practices of delivery that they don't know because they're not educated, 1, and then 2, to train, to donate betting kits, 2, so that it can aid them in delivery, because those betting kits are the modern types, and they can use it to implement what they've been taught in the part 1. And then 3, they train them again on how to use the betting kits. They train them on several simulations, how the child will do it. If the baby does this, this is how you can do it. This is how you can do it. And this example, like I said, is, I've shared my own story with you of the Cassava Project Factory. I'm now sharing this one to outline, to pick out an example from it, right? Because like I said last week, there isn't a very tangible example I could use from your comments. So that's why I'm using an example of a scenario that I made up, right? So that is what happened with this corps member. So after that, he was really successful with his training. Remember, that's the results. He was able to train those midwives. And during the commissioning of the day, the midwives were able to come out and talk and actually demonstrate that they learned what has been taught. All the 5 of them talked about what they've learned. They talked about all the 3 scenarios they've been trained in and demonstrated, did examples, demonstrated how to check that the baby's head is somewhere. They also demonstrated what to ask for during the antenatal, things to talk about, things to ask the mother, how she's feeling. They learned all that, they demonstrated it. Wow, amazing. Even the Oga Patapata of the Baba himself also spoke to demonstrate that he has learned it well. That's the result. Now, what was the impact of the project? You have to communicate the impact, because now impact comes from a while. You need to study what you have done for a while. So now there are initially, the result is that there are 5 midwives and 1 local doctor, herbal doctor that, have been trained and they have demonstrated knowledge. Then what happened after that? What next? Right. And so you wait 2 months to see what happened, to evaluate. And so this our young couple waited, and for 6 months, he observed that there's been a change. That out of about 100 pregnant women that came there to deliver, there was 80% decrease in maternal mortality. It means that 80% of the people were left there in good health with their baby. In the previous scenario, it could have been 50%, the others would have died. Now, that's an impact, because it means that your training has led to decrease in maternal mortality. It has led to less women dying from complications, childbirth complications. That's the link that is going to be made. I did a training and now more women are not dying. Not I did a training. Now there are 5 women, now there are 5 nurses who have been trained and they know the knowledge, right? I'm sure that, I know that you're getting this, right? So that's how to think about it. His program has reduced maternal mortality, yeah, by 80%. That's a high increase. And how you can even defend it further is by talking about the scenario in the previous instance, so that a good comparison can be made and people can see how your result beats the odds, right? So out of about a 50% death rates, there's now a 80% life rates, right? And so you have hit the nail on the head. You have achieved just exactly what you set out to achieve. You identified a problem, and your impact, not your results, speaks directly to your problem. It is the impact that speaks directly to the problem and not the results. So that was the third example that I said I would make, and I will now go ahead to go to the next point. I hope that you're listening in and thinking about the questions that you asked. Somebody said something on the chat box, and I want to read it out. In essence, results occur immediately upon project completion, while impact occurs over time and is measured over a period after project completion. Perfect. That's just a very good summary. Thank you, Chinyere Otsonye. That's just it. That's just the truth of the matter. For impact, you must measure it after a while. Depending on the scale of the project, it can be 1 month after, depending on what you have done, 2 months after, 6 months after, and 1 year after. At least for all types of projects, at least from 6 months to 1 year, you should be able to see what has changed in that time space. So thank you for pointing that out. Moving on to the next stage. If there are any quick comments on the chat, I will read it now before we go to the final part of our training, which is in the next slide. So I'll just go right ahead to the next slide. Remember, the last slide talks about evaluating your project, process, results, and impact. The process, which is, let me just summarize that quickly. The process, which was the process that you took to do the program, all of the arrangements that you did, all of the identifying of the volunteers that you did, all of the identifying of the projects in the community, the problem in the community, choosing a specific niche that you can address in the community, bringing volunteers on, before then, designing the very project you want to do after you have seen the problem, designing the solution, then recruiting your volunteers to work on the solution that you have identified, and then execution. Those are all the parts of the process. So let me just say it this way, the day one of this, our training last week, Monday, is really the process we talked about. And the day two, last Thursday, is really the process we talked about of that your project. And after you've executed your project, you will immediately come across the results of your project, meaning that the very thing you set out to do, you have now done it, yeah, the results. And then you will measure the impact after some time, right? Yes, so that's just a summary of that. And we'll then go over to the next one. I want you to keep your questions together for me. And then let's think about the role of the volunteer manager. This is the last thing we will do today, the role of the volunteer manager. Maybe in your community-based organization, in your organization, maybe you're also the volunteer manager, because me, I was during my time. In fact, it was only me. Yeah, so I did not have any volunteer manager. I just had myself, and I was one who did most of the things. Before I then found, eventually though, the community members helped, like the pastors really helped, the women helped at the time. They helped to identify something. They helped to come up with ideas of things that can work. The pastors helped a lot. They also even gave us their church spaces to use. They were so happy about the project. So I'm just saying that to say that if you don't have a volunteer manager, identify one from your community. Sometimes in my own project, we call them the village mentor. Identify one that can run with you in the community. But that is not in all cases, because the person you identify for the community, they are the recipient, the beneficiary. They may not really know about your goals and objectives. So what I meant to say there really was work with the people in the community to just help do some things. But for volunteer manager, you can actually be the one. You have to be the one. So volunteer managers, let's think about it for a moment. And sharing an example from my project, the cassava processing factory, I was the one. Yeah. So let's think of it for a moment. They sometimes assume a number of roles in program evaluation. Wow, look at that. That's just what I said now, isn't it? I said that I assumed all the roles. So there you go. They also said it. So They sometimes assume a number of roles. They may be required to plan and organize evaluation. They may be required to implement it or interpret its findings to justify, let me move this thing a little bit, to justify or improve the program. In other situations, volunteer managers are expected to cooperate with external evaluators and then implement their recommendations. Recommendations, that's an aspect we're also going to talk about. Recommendations. So in this case, let's pretend that you're the one, right, that is also the volunteer manager, yeah? So you have to, in this evaluation that you're trying to do in this project, like we talked about in the last slide, where we talked about it in detail, you trying to measure your impact and evaluate what the volunteers did, what they didn't do well, what the problem is with your process, the people that harassed you in the site, when you talk about all of that. So when you talk about all of that, it's the process of you doing your evaluation, right? So from this activity that you did, right, you have to take a lot of notes, right? You have to, as a volunteer manager and as the founder of the organization, or if you have a volunteer manager in your team, this is what they have to do. They have to take notes of what has happened with the volunteers or with the project, right? So all of these impacts we just talked about, you have to write that down. You have to write that down. You have to write down the negative aspects of them so that you can change them later, right? Like I told you guys in one of our programs, Climate Leadership Fellowship, we saw that a particular speaker that is very, very well high rated in Nigeria did not really deliver on the subject. You know, it was so shocking, right? So now we know that next time we will not invite this very speaker, or even if we don't invite them, we will put up a system in place for how to identify our speakers and not just make a very big decision that because the person is popular, let us bring them in as a speaker. There you go. Now that was the mistake that we made. You know, because we just assumed that, oh, wow, they always do all this, you know, this thing is everywhere. People are always talking about them. Wow, they must be an expert. But the opposite was the case when the person came on board to speak on a very, very simple topic. Right. So now what we learned from that is that the volunteer speakers we're bringing in for our climate project has to meet some requirements. So we created a template, a list of metrics to choose our speakers. Proven track record, a number, they should have authored a number of articles in the line or in the subject matter of the project. And we listed a number of things that they will make. But we couldn't have been able to do this if we did not observe that as a problem, right? We couldn't have been able to do that if we did not observe that that was a problem by doing an evaluation, yeah? So it's very interesting because then we learned what we needed to change for later, what we needed to change for another program, or when we have that session again, since we always have it in cohorts, yeah? Sorry. So then the next thing to think about is, okay, just basically taking notes of everything that has happened. That's what this part is really talking about. And set up a system to solve it or to do better. You have to think about your volunteers and how they have helped the scenario. In our case, we identified that that volunteer did not do a good job. So it's made us to come up with metrics or to change the person completely. In other situations, you as a project leader or volunteer management might invite external evaluators to come and look at the project for you. That's usually the better thing to do if you have the funding, yeah? But apart from that, you can also do it. Really, I think you can do it. It's not really, for our programs, we've always done it ourselves, our evaluations, except it's a funded project where some of the funders have their own evaluators. Yeah, some of the funders have their own evaluators. They'll come and look at what you've done and they'll give recommendations, or they will provide corrections, or they will tell you that this is wrong. They will express that they're not happy with how it happened. Then they'll tell you what to do. Right. An example of that, let me tell you, is that there are some projects that are funded in USD dollars. Yeah. Sometimes Because of the fluctuation of the Naira, you're going to have a problem in your project because the example that I'm using to make this is one of the energy funds that is out there called the Off-Grid Energy Challenge. It's actually funded by the US ATF. So it's open now for people that are in sector. What I thought about is that there is $100,000 grant, but 50% is debts that you have to pay back. I don't know if that's the current situation, but when I applied for it in 2019, that was the situation. We were shortlisted for it before we're shortlisted as a finalist. So we did a lot of due diligence for like almost a year. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. The due diligence for almost a year, we were having meetings from time to time. But one challenge that I had, or that I was going to have, is because our organization is meant to pay back the loan, the 50% of the loan, which is $50,000. I kept thinking about how to do that. Why? Because I am trading, I'm doing the business in Naira. So you're bringing the dollar and you're using, you're executing in Naira. The Naira fluctuations is just so, it's very troubling because eventually your plan to pay back the money, by the time you gather the money to pay back, it's no longer the same value with the dollar, yeah? It's no longer the same value. You're going to have a big problem because you're going to always be changing your prices. That is going to affect your delivery. You will change your price multiple times to try and meet up with the dollar increase. And before you know, you don't even know what you're doing because then your money is just scattered. The dollar, the money you're having, which is the correct value you're supposed to have, you're not able, it does not equal to the dollar you're supposed to pay. So that was a risk from the beginning. And so some of the evaluators and the people that were working on the project told us about hedge funding, where you could keep your money. I can't remember how they described it, and it will not be affected by the fluctuation or the instability. Why I mentioned that is because we're talking about external evaluators. So we had people that came in to look at our office, if we were ready for the funding and all of that. So now they gave us an advice, hedge funding. That's what this means right here. This part means managers are expected to cooperate with external evaluators and then implement their recommendation. So sometimes if the external evaluators did not come in, I would not have known about the hedge fund. Yeah, it was a good advice because they are more experienced. They've reviewed a lot more other projects than you can ever imagine that you have not reviewed. So you haven't learned any lessons from that. So the advice is usually very, very valuable. Yeah. So if you have the funding, please invite external evaluation. If you don't, you can do the evaluation. In fact, I don't think there is a need to do that so that you can create a plan to implement the feedbacks. So what I usually do, like I said before, is to have that kind of evaluation session with my team members, 5 of them. We stay and talk about what has worked and what hasn't worked. In one of such scenarios about another program we had, one of my volunteers we found out from feedback that it looked like our courses were extremely intensive. It was just too intensive because our participants were saying it was like a PhD. They said it was good, but we could tell they were overwhelmed in that program. It was a virtual program that had to do with engineering, very detailed engineering about hydropower, onshore wind, and other electricity generation sources apart from solar power, right? We had experts from all over the world come and do the training. Yeah, we had experts from the world come and do the training. I think you guys lost me for a little bit. I had a call. So we got feedback that our program is really intensive because it was for 6 months and it was so well, it was really jam-packed. Our students had lectures almost every day and the lectures were 2 hours, some of them spanned into 3 hours per time. At the point we noticed that some of them are not joining the live calls again. Out of about 60 of the fellows, about 40 were regularly showing up. Sometimes it reduced to 30. So I talked about it with my volunteers and we just figured out that it was really intensive, even for us that are the organizers sitting through those courses. And they are technical courses. They are like a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity because what you learn there is PhD standard. But then it was still overwhelming for our fellows. So we thought about how to solve that. The program announcement is open now for the 2nd cohort, and we've been able to implement those things because now we've been able to space out the program since it's going to be online now and not live trainings with the lecturers. We've now decided to space it out more and just spread it out some more and give spaces in between days. So in a week, our fellows have only 3 activities, 3 courses, instead of regular courses like it was last time. So do you see how feedback can help you do a better project the next time? So that's like another example. So when you take all of these evaluations from your volunteers, from the beneficiaries themselves, and from your staff or from the people that work with you, you'll be able to see the changes that you should make. So we have about 7 more minutes to 12:30. I usually like to stop around 12:30 so we can have 30 minutes for questions, but we'll just take it, we just keep going until we get to the time. So that's the thing to think about. And then another thing to keep in mind is that you have to think about volunteer. You have to think about how well served, let me just read that out, sorry. Volunteer managers are well served by possessing the knowledge and skills required in program evaluation so that their decision-making, and record-keeping can be guided by the need to demonstrate program efficiency and effectiveness. It's important for volunteer managers like yourself, let's just say that you're the one in your team, to possess knowledge and skills required in evaluation. Because if they are leading the evaluation team, they need to know what they are looking out for. So my advice to you is make sure you write down the areas they're going to evaluate. And I think that's what we also said in that first part. Let me just get to it. Yes, you need to describe various types of evaluation. Look at it right there and develop your metrics, how you're going to evaluate, what are the steps you're going to look out for, and this and that, right? Which aspect you evaluate? Is it the volunteers? Is it the program? Is it the community? Is it the beneficiaries? Like I told you about our cassava processing projects, we evaluated the entire project itself. We evaluated the community and how they received it, and we're able to pick out all of those impacts I talked about from the beneficiaries. Beneficiaries are two in this case, the women and the community. So thinking about the Oba, the king, and all of that. So you have to be well-versed on the knowledge to conduct that evaluation so that you can think in advance what you are going to evaluate, what you are going to check, what in the volunteers are you going to check? What exactly are you going to check from the volunteers? Are you going to check if they showed up on time? Are you going to check if they discharge their duties well? Are you going to evaluate the fact that the speakers you invited showed up there? Like we did in my program, where we then found out that the speaker's content was not in the same quality line as the program that we had, right? So we checked that. It's because we knew in advance to check that, so we checked that. So we checked it because we wrote it down in the initial instance that we were going to talk about this and that we were going to check this, how this worked out. Secondly, you have to think, you have to be very well skilled in record keeping. Yeah? So you have to write out things that are going on in the project so that you could review them later. In the process of implementation, you have to take note of how every activity is unfolding. Every facet of the activity is unfolded. If it's a 1-week program, if it's a 1-day program, you have to schedule your activities per day. It's important to have a table that can show activity, person in charge to deliver it, and deliverable. You see, when I was younger in the industry, I used to see those. I never knew the importance of it. But whilst engaging and working on my organization, I found out the importance that you wrote down a deliverable because you needed to measure it. I didn't know that before. You wrote down a deliverable from one volunteer or from one activity. What should happen as a result of them doing that activity? What should be the outcome or deliverable? The goal is that so that at the end of your project, you should be able to measure, to measure what has gone on, or the impact. Did this person deliver exactly what we have written down that they will deliver? And after you come up with this, you must give it to your volunteers. You must give it to every member of the project to read it, study it, to chew it, and to swallow it and digest it. So that automatically, even if you wake them up from sleep, they will tell you what the deliverable is. You have to have a deliverable for the overall project, which is kind of like the results, what you're going to deliver. to the community. So that during your evaluation moments, you can then bring out this form that you filled, and you can check all of the deliverables. In that form, you have all of the volunteers, let's say there are 5, you have all of their activities and the deliverables. And you also have the activities you outlined for the program and the deliverable from that particular one activity. So if, for example, if you said in your activity that you were going to reach out to the king of the community and ask him to donate a space for you guys to hold your program, what is the deliverable? The donated and cleared space. In the course of your conversation with the king, when you went to discuss about the space, you have to discuss what you want them to do for you in the space. Should they just give you a space, or should they also make it ready by putting chairs and a projector, or cleaning it up? If there were grasses in the compound where they were going to give you the space, will you also discuss all of that? Or did you think that that would just naturally come with giving the space? So don't be surprised when that doesn't come. That's why you put a deliverable, what you expect from as a result of that activity. And so if you expected that that they should give you a hall that's fully prepared, so that all you need to do is come with your training and you don't have to bring the equipment or to clear the compound, make sure you discuss that in your activity. In that activity, you discuss that. Whatever deliverable you want to attain, make sure you request for it. Do not assume things. A lot of young people in Nigeria assume things. They just assume that since we're coming to do a project for you people for free, you guys should know you should give me a space for free and put electricity and do it well. What if they think that you're capable to do that? So that's why you shouldn't leave things to chance, and don't assume, no matter how obvious it looks, no matter how simple it looks, don't assume that they understand that, or that they will just do that, right? So it's very, very important to keep that in mind, so that when you write down the deliverable, at the end of that activity, after that activity has been implemented, you have to check your deliverable and see if it's in alignment. If that deliverable, the very thing that you have achieved from performing that activity, is in alignment with what you have planned for it to be. That way you can track your progress, you can tick your checklist and see that, and be sure that you've met all the goals. This very process is very, very valuable during the time you do your evaluation. It's like a guide to check that everything is well done. Right, and so the key person, the project lead and the volunteer manager, has to be good at record keeping, so that they can be guided by the need to demonstrate program efficiency and effectiveness. The record will guide you to come up with an efficient and an effective program. So those things you wrote down, you use it to check your checklist, you use it to compare with the results, right? You use it to compare with the results, and you are able to demonstrate efficiency and effectiveness. At the end of that program, you see that you're going to have a template. And so next program you run, you already have a template that you can reuse. If you spend time, work hard to do all these things now, you will have that template to use and continue to refer to it. Wow. That brings me to the end of this class. And whilst I'm at it, I will like to, I think I've already done that. I was going to say that I would like to just go over what we have learned today whilst we need to take questions, but that's basically it. I've already gone over that. I've already gone over the fact of how to evaluate your program. That was the title of our topic today, program evaluation. We shared the metrics. And I hope that now that we've come to the end, you'll be able to describe the types of evaluation you do for volunteers, for beneficiaries, for your project team, and you will come up with metrics like the kind of form I said that you could create to track deliverables, and all of the detailed examples we shared on the process, the results, and the impacts, which are the key 3 things that you should evaluate in your program. Yeah, these key 3 things that you should evaluate in your program. We shared about 4 or 5 different examples, and we brought out the results and the impact of those examples. So And then we talked about the skills required by the project team lead or the volunteer manager to be able to execute this evaluation. They need to be good at record keeping. They need to be good at decision making, because they can sometimes quickly need to assign a role to somebody that has not been planned in advance or that is not in your deliverable list. Yeah. So you need to be able to decide quickly without thinking, oh, who can come and help me? What am I going to do? Who can come and help me? What am I going to do? And let me share an example with you about how that happened in one of our programs. Let me share it with you. In one of our programs where we were going to graduate a set of fellows, there are about 5, we usually give awards, right? About 5 outstanding fellows. So there was one fellow who was supposed to get an award, but somehow, I don't know how we skipped this person. We've awarded him with another different thing, but he was supposed to really be one of the 5 outstanding. But someone else had replaced him. And on the day of the call, we had our funders, our donors on call on this day. And the main boss from our funders was the one who was going to be reading out awards for these people. So I realized that one of the fellows whom we've had arguments about if he should really be on that top 5, because I believe that this other person was more qualified, right? So, but then on the call on that day, we found out that the other person was not even on the call. Wow. That's the person who was going to get the award was not on the call. Now, I needed to think really fast because I cannot have our funders call up someone who was not on the call. And it was a graduation event. So what kind of program are you really running if the person is not on call? If the person reached out though to say that he had to go to the hospital, but there was something just like it wasn't professional at all not to have the person to receive their award. I decided really fast to change that person, and we offered the award to the other person that I thought was more qualified, who was on the call, and he got the opportunity, right? And now that was a very swift decision-making skill because I had to quickly change the name on the certificate. Now, the person who designed the award plaques, which was physical, that we had to show, the soft copy version of it on the screen, was not even available. Like, he was not in the team. He was an outdoor person. So I had to edit it myself using a software. You can imagine not having the raw file, but I had to quickly edit it and change the name. So that's an example of decision making, a very fast one. Leaders need to be able to decide, because if you did not have a good decision making skill, you'll be stuck in that place where you're thinking, should we give it to him? What should we do? And then you'll be summing your team members. Like, I was chatting with one person on the call, and she said, one of my volunteers, she said, ma, that is late. Oh, how are you going to change his late? So I could have changed my mind by that, isn't it? But a good decision making will help you quickly come out of a jam, because you need to decide immediately to do it or not, instead of being stuck in that middle place where you're wondering, should we give him? But he said he's in the hospital, though. Should we not give him? But this other person is on the call now. Should we not give him? But I quickly made up my mind and we fixed it. I changed it immediately, and that person was actually the first person to be called up. I've since then been very proud of how this fellow has continued to lead environmental activities in the industry much better than the other person who would have gotten the award. So I was very proud of myself for making that swift decision at that time, without thinking, oh, is it not fair? He said he was he was in the hospital. Is it fair? Is it not fair? But I've always believed that this other person was more qualified. So I hope you can see how volunteer managers and project team leaders can use decision making and record keeping to provide and to come out with a program that is effective and efficient. So that brings me to the end of my class. Thank you for listening, everyone.
I think that's we need to clap very well.
Thank you, sir.
At American Center here, a lot of us are clapping except for one person.
Thank you guys.
All right,
for clapping.
Thank you very much. Everyone is clapping.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We now quickly take questions, and it's going to go by how people have raised their hands. First come, first served. BC or Dunsi, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Please, let's just go straight to the question. My name is, and my question is, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Adebisi. Okay, examining the volunteer management program. I just want to ask, because she mentioned something about the impact and results and the processes, which she has mentioned. I just want to ask, how can we, apply this to a kind of our own
NGO.
yes, no, we are not NGO, we are insurance people. So how can we apply such to our own work? Thank you.
Okay, you're an insurance company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So most of what I shared has to do with community-based projects. So if you run a company or work in a place where you hold community-based programs, or you have initiatives, or part of your business process involves engaging community or running any form of project, that's where you can implement some of these things we've taught. You have to, it boils down to what I've talked about from day one. Design the project, find a problem. So you have to ask yourself, what problem am I solving in that community? What problem do I want to solve in the insurance space? What is my business process in the insurance space? How do we want to impact our community? So when you think about how you want to impact your community, you then look for the problem you want to impact in that community, then design the solution for it, then execute the project. When you do this, give yourself 2 months to 6 months, then you evaluate your process. So depending on what the subject is, or subject of your intervention is, you can then figure out what impact you have had. Maybe we provided training for a group of accounting students on insurance. And so at the end of 6 months, 2 of them picked up internship slots as in insurance firms. That's an impact. And that way, that student who picked up the internship slot has been able to complete his school fees, which he couldn't complete before, as a result of your training. So your training or whatever project you ran then gave him the guide that he needed to secure an internship slot, which then supported him to complete the payment of his fees. That is the impact of your project. So you must always, you are able to implement what I've talked about in my presentation if you have identified a problem that you want to solve and you've designed a solution on how to solve it.
All right, let's go to Benin City. Please unmute yourself. Yes, Benin City, go ahead. You are not audible.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Move closer.
Is it better?
Much better.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I was saying that I think mine is just an extension of the clapping that we have openly done. I really want to appreciate Glory Ogwegbu. I've really gained so much. Thank you so much. I think you demonstrated a lot of expertise in your presentations. I wouldn't mind if I can have your contact so that I can be mentored. I've always loved identifying problems and profiling solutions, but I think I was so far away from assessing impact. I think that's where I really have to up my game or have a paradigm shift. So I really want to be mentored. Thank you so much for your presentation. God bless you. Thank you, my director, for making me for encouraging me to be part of this section.
Thank you for thanking Glory. We go to Ikeja.
Thank you so much.
Ikeja, please. Oshobo next.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Go ahead,
Yes.
please.
Fine. I listened to the program evaluation segment. That is the process, result, and impact. And we know that when we talk about organizational effectiveness, they are driven towards the results. Now that you brought the impact aspect of it, would you talk about organizational impact driven or result driven this time around? That means everything as a non-profit should be geared towards impact in your evaluation. Is that, or should we just change the effectivity to be impact driven than result driven? Because we know that effectivity is about results. Organizational effectiveness is about results. So that's the question I have.
Okay, thank you for asking that. So you cannot do with the two must work together. Indeed, your impact is what your impact is what speaks to the problem you identified. Your result is just your result. Like someone wisely said in the comments during the speech, someone said in the comments, your result is the execution. So you've identified that these women are poor in this community. So you built a factory to give them jobs. That's your result. So after you left, because you were copper, after you left, they then left the job because they decided that they did not know how to turn on the machine. They decided that, well, they prefer to sell tomatoes on the markets. So they left the job. You have not made an impact. Do you understand the difference now? Your result is that you delivered the project. Of course, you did. Wow. Well, these people didn't have job, and I delivered the result for them. I built a factory so that they can start working and selling cassava and working with the factory. But when you left, they abandoned it. Now, but the impact comes from the fact that they engaged your product. They engaged your solution. They started doing what you built that factory for, and they started to work in it. In 6 months, their income improved and they sent their children to school as a result of the results. In 6 months, they started selling Gary in the market. In 6 months, they started exporting. I'm telling you what happened in my project. In 6 months, they started exporting. No, I don't think that won't happen in 6 months, but they started bagging. They will bag Gary and they sent to NYSC factory. I did a linking with these women and the NYSC of the state so that they could buy Gary from the women instead of buying it from the market. So in 6 months, my women were sending Gary to the camp and they made money from that. With the money they made, they started to give out small micro loans. That's microfinance. That's your impact. Women, 200 women have financial literacy on how to save. 500 children of the widows have started going to school. 200 widows are now with employment. That's the impact. So you see how it's different from results. I hope it's clearer now. Thank you.
Oshogbo, please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Then
Yeah,
Oka gets set.
My question is, in evaluating volunteers, is there any specific form or form format that will guide the volunteer manager in the evaluation? You know, we have 3 stages from today's class: the process, the result, and the impact. So I want to ask if there is a specific form that will be a decision support materials in the evaluation of volunteers. So that's my questions.
Okay, thank you for that. So the Yali network has some resources that you can check. I don't know about one for now, but in my speech, I talked about that you can create a form yourself and fill that form with the activities that will occur in your program, the volunteers that will work from that activity, that will work on that activity, and the deliverable. But that one is, you will do it at the beginning of your project, so that during your evaluation, you can now go back to this form and check if everybody met that requirement. So at this point, that is what I have to say. You can use that kind of form that you developed. You and your team will develop this form according to how your program is. But I think there are some resources. Please check the yalinetwork.org for their resources on small businesses. and there are resources on entrepreneurship. So I think the website is yali.org, yali.com. I really can't remember.
yali.state.gov/courses.
Thank you, sir. Exactly. Please check that resource. Apart from the courses, they have resources you can download for small businesses. So check for something on evaluation. But basically, what I explained is what you can do to start out. Thank you.
Okay, over to you. Please, let's be quick.
Okay. Good morning. Ms.
Good
Glory, we
morning.
thank you very much for
Just
for
look
your
at this. Just look in
this
front of
morning.
you.
Okay. Okay. We are happy for this exposition in Oka. We are very grateful. It's actually educating and captivating. I started last week, Tuesday, Monday. And after hearing you, I do feel like go back, start immediately. But I think I have some questions that I need to put across to you because actually
Madam,
for some time now,
Madam,
yeah,
Madam,
yes, sir.
ask the question.
Yeah. Okay, the question is,
Uh-huh.
for a beginner, someone beginning and you started an NGO, you have a project you want to execute in a community, and you have actually articulated what you want to do. There are some certain areas that gives me a kind. I do discover that they do have, when they're calling people together, something like refreshments. And at the time you want to have a program and you're not financially buoyant to sponsor that program, I don't know how I should be able to start. Where can we approach a community for some kinds of assistance when you want to render a service to them? That's my question, please.
I think, Glory?
Sorry, I did not hear that very well. You said, what if you wanted to do a project and you're not financially buoyant? Was that the main question that you asked? Windows.
Yes. Is it possible? Is it possible to approach the community to get some help from them if they're really interested in the program?
Okay, the community is the one that requested for the program. Yeah?
No.
Can they request?
You saw a need.
Okay, for funding. Yes. Okay, thank you for asking that. So, first of all, if the community had money, they could have fixed that problem, don't you think? Themselves. They would have been able to fix that problem. So, now let me tell you what happened in my project, in the cassava factory project. I tried to independently raise money. See, when you're working in communities, the reason you're trying to do a community-based project is because you're trying to help the people there. And it is your initiative. It is you who thought of the project and thought that it was important to deliver this program, right? So now that is your responsibility. Raising funds is your complete responsibility. What happened in my own project is that I wrote a proposal and went to different places which I thought could be interested in something like that. By something like that, I mean, they are interested in economic growth of women. They are interested in fostering Christian relationships. So I went to churches. I even went to the National Mosque, Abuja. For those of you that know that place, that was a long time ago, 2013. I was bold enough to walk in there, and of course, I was chased back. Right, so I tried to look for people, for funders whose goals align to the project. The place to look for funding is not the community. You are going to limit your options. Go other places and look for funding. So if you're trying to run a project and you hope that people give you money, that's the beginning of failure, I'm sorry to say, right? So what happened in my project is at a point, the king called me and gave me money. I did not ask him. And I was hoping not to ask him because I know that the community is struggling, but he gave me money in an envelope and said that they have contributed the money to support whatever I was doing. and it was so helpful. Then at a point, the pastors and the mosque leaders also called me and gave me something in an envelope. I never told these people that I needed money. And what they raised for me was not so big, but it was helpful at the time that the funding came. So it's not a good strategy to ask the community members. No, you can reach out to people from the community that are prominent. Now, that's another strategy I tried, and I'm happy I remembered that now to tell you. Reach out to the community. Ask the king to tell you the community people who are prominent in the world or in the society. I did that, and my king told me that the current minister for urban and regional planning in Nigeria was from the village. The current, not minister, but like a second in command minister. And I went to his office in Abuja, and he supported my project. So look for prominent people that whose native is that community. Yeah. Ask the king to tell you, ask the community leader to tell you the people that are from this community that are doing well in the world. Reach out to those people, they'll help you because you're trying to do something in their community. I did that and I got help from one. Another one of such persons gave me a hotel. He owns a hotel in the village and he gave me that hotel room and hosted my guests that came for the commissioning of projects, including my parents that came from far and my family members, right? So he didn't give us money, but he was able to give us a room for 3 days. So that's how to think about it. Thank you.
Ikeja again. Let's go to Ikeja again. Then we go back to Shogbo and then Oka.
Okay. Good afternoon. I want to ask that when should program evaluation start when carrying out a community-based project? Then secondly, I also want to ask, are there tools for program evaluation? Are there tools that helps in carrying out effective program evaluation? Or yeah, then thirdly, I want to ask, are there NGOs in the United States that partner with NGOs in Nigeria? And if they are, where can we get it? Are there websites where we can actually get it from? The list of those NGOs where we can get them. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So when you do your program evaluation is at the end of the project, right? At the end of the project, you do a quick evaluation at the end, maybe sharing a survey to figure out what has happened. In your evaluation, if you're listening closely to what I shared, process, result, and impact, you're going to evaluate the process of the project that you did. That should occur at the end of the project because by then you have finished doing the process. Process is identify the community, identify the problem you want to solve, bring your volunteers, decide on the project you want to do to solve that specific problem, and then executing it. After you've done all this, you wait at least 3 months, depending on your project scale, to check the impact of the project. So that's when you do your project evaluation. Then you ask if there is a tool. I answered exactly that question about 2 answers ago, that you go to yali.state.gov to look for entrepreneurial tools. But before you can do that, please draft a list by yourself. Create a form that includes all of your project activities, the person in charge of delivering it, and the deliverable that should come from executing that project. That way, during your evaluation, you can use that tool to check if everything has been done. That's a tool that I created for my project. But I'm sure that in yali.gov, the state.gov, you have all of that. Then you said if there are funders, there are always funding all over the place. Please sign up on opportunitydesk.com. I'm going to share the link here. I'm sure you already know it, to find examples of funding from not just US, because you asked about US, from all over the world. There are many of them that are from US, to find all of that. And then you apply for the ones that you're suitable for. I just announced a funding that's currently open for $100,000 for people in the energy space. If you have an innovative idea that is related to solar power or climate change, mostly solar power, there's a fund open for that. Go to, opportunitydesk.com is the ones that I know for funding. So that's what I can share with you for now. Thank you.
Oshogbo.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. My name is Mokocha Chijoke, and I want to ask a question quickly. I've been hearing you mention impact and results. I want to know the impact you're talking about, can you also call it an outcome? And also the result, can you also call it an output? Because I understand that, like you said, there is a difference between a result and an impact. I also know that there is a difference between an output and an outcome, which means that an output, you have, it comes as a result of the direct consequences of whatever project that you have carried out. So I just want to know if the impact you have been talking about also have to do with outcome. Thank you.
Yes, you can do with that. They are one and the same. They can be used interchangeably. But every type of impact has to be quantifiable and measurable, right? So you can call it an outcome. Your question is just a case of use of words. Outputs, you can call that results. An outcome of the project can be measured after 3 to 4 months of that project has been executed, right? So yes, you can call it that, but just note that your impact is you measuring the results, the thing that you've executed, the project that you have built, the cassava factory you built. What has happened to the people that are there? Did their life change? Did they get better jobs? Did they make more money? That can be the outcome or the project impact. Impact has to do with how it has impacted the life of the people, not just how you built that factory there, which is the result. Thank you.
Finally, we go to Oka, and that's it for today. Oka.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Emanuela Ononi. I'm not sure if I heard right, but I think you said something about dollars having an effect on the implementation of a project. How is that so, ma?
Okay, thankfully you said you're not sure you heard right. Now, I explained an example when we're talking about mishaps that can happen during the project, right? We were talking about external evaluators coming into your program, external evaluators coming into your project to evaluate your project. And we were giving an example of a feedback that they can give. And I wanted to ask Mr. Samuel, please, if there's a recording of the program, which can be shared to the participants. Is that going to be made available, sir?
Yes, we always do for those who are registered.
Because I really feel that some of the questions you guys are asking, you should be listening again to the presentation, because I really answered all of them there. But I'll go ahead to say that sometimes external evaluators can come into your project. You can invite them to come if you can afford to pay for them. If you find free ones, that's also okay. But my advice then was that you can actually evaluate your own project yourself. But sometimes feedbacks given by the evaluators are often helpful. I then gave an example with a project that happened that we were shortlisted for, which had to do with paying back a debt. Part of the funds was a debt that you have to pay back, right? So it involved paying back USD. So if you were to pay back USD, if you collected money in loan, $50,000, and you had to pay that back in dollars, you remember that you're doing the business in Naira. So your revenue is in Naira. Because of the fluctuation of the dollar and Naira, it's going to affect how you can pay your dollars back, right? So that was the example I gave then, where I said that if you're trying to pay back $1,000 every month towards your debt, towards the money that you borrowed, right? You can, by the time you save up that $1,000, by tomorrow, the dollar will change or the fluctuation will happen. And the money you have saved, if it's 300, I don't know how much the dollar is now. If it was 600, if your $1,000 was $600,000, 600,000 Naira, and you have saved it that day to pay it back towards the debt, then the dollar will increase to 710 Naira. Now, what you need to pay back is 710,000. instead of 600,000. You see how that affects you because you're trading in the nation's currency.
Yes,
You're
ma'am.
executing the grants in the nation's currency. So that will affect you. In this case, external evaluators gave us an advice to hedge our funds. There's something called hedge funds. When we hedge the funds, we keep it safe and the dollar fluctuations does not affect it. So that was just an example that I made then. That's how to think about external evaluators and how to use their feedback to help your program. So I was saying that it was good to have them because sometimes they can give you these kinds of advices that you haven't thought of before. For instance, I didn't think about hedge funding. It was my first time of hearing it. So in that case, an external evaluator was very helpful for our program. I hope that is helpful for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. God bless you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming on this program. I believe we've all gotten one thing or the other. So I want to plead with everybody to put your hands together once again and appreciate our speaker for today. Thank you very, very, very much, Glory. We are always very happy, glad when we have one of the people that we have identified as prospective leaders. And they've gone ahead after the program to make their impact. Now you can see the impact. You can imagine how many people she has affected. And through this program, we'll be able to tell you how many people have been affected. Hopefully, you will join us for the final session on Thursday. And we hope that you have cause to return for the next module. So Glory, thank you very much for coming. We hope to see you among the participants another Glory. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody. See you on Thursday. Bye.